Imagine you open an old archive book, and you see line after line, Imperial infants of Tartaria, 1880 to 1920. The children are recorded perfectly, down to tiny details. But there are no parents. There's a birth date. There's a weight. There's a crib number. There's a stamp that says transferred. But where mother and father should be, it's blank. Or it has one cold word, unknown. And it's not 10 entries, it's hundreds. Then it gets worse, because these infant houses don't look like shelters. They look like stone palaces, thick walls, strange quiet rooms, metal doors, vent shafts like a factory. And then you find a photo, where a strange object hangs above the cribs, like a bell or a heavy metal dome. In the first print, it's there. In the later print, it's painted out, like it never existed. And in that moment, the question is no longer, where are the parents? The question becomes, who made these children part of a system, and why? So, what was this really? Mercy? Or someone else's plan that was carefully buried? Vienna, 1891. A municipal archive 3 floors below street level. The air smells like dust and old paper. A single electric lamp hangs over a wooden table. On the table, a registry book, leather-bound, thick as a fist. The clerk opens it to page 112. Row after row, column after column. Names, numbers, dates, stamps. Infant number 472. Born March the 8th. Weight 3.2 kilograms. Crib assignment, Ward C, position 14. Transfer stamp, relocated April 2nd. Everything is written down with cold, careful detail, except one thing. The columns marked mother and father are empty. Or they hold one word, printed in the same stiff hand, unknown. Not for one child, not for 10, for hundreds. Now, you might think, this is an orphanage. Of course there are no parents. That's the whole idea. But here is where the first crack shows up. The building that held these children wasn't called an orphanage. The official name was Imperial Infant Depository No. 7. Not a shelter, not a home, a depository. That word is used for warehouses, for storage rooms, for places where you keep things you plan to move later. And the building matches the word. A photograph survives from 1893. It shows the main hall of this depository. Look at the walls, stone, not plaster. Look at the ceiling, vaulted and reinforced. Look at the windows, tall and arched, but fitted with iron frames you'd expect in a factory, not a nursery. The floor is tiled in hard geometric patterns, easy to wash, hard to break. And in the center of the frame, rows of metal cribs, identical, evenly spaced, lined up with the neatness of a drill formation. This is not a charity ward built from donations and kind words. This is infrastructure, built to last, built to expand, built to run the same way every day. A floor plan from the same period shows rooms with strange labels. Quiet Chamber A, Air Circulation Hall, Registry Corridor, Observation Gallery. Why would infants need an observation gallery? The records go on, page after page. Infant number 509, female, born June the 14th. Weight 2.8 kilograms. Health status, viable. Transfer stamp, relocated June 30th. 16 days old, already moved. Infant number 510, male, born June the 15th. Weight 3.1 kilograms. Health status, viable. Transfer stamp, relocated July 3rd. 18 days, gone. The pattern repeats. Children arrive, children are weighed, measured, numbered. Children are transferred. To where? The ledger doesn't say. The column exists, destination, but it's filled with codes, not places. Facility K. Station 12, Node West. Codes that do not show up anywhere else in the municipal archive. And this is the moment the ground shifts under your feet, because if you're thinking, okay, sad history, poor orphans, cold paperwork, I need you to hold on to that thought, just for a minute. What comes next makes this feel less like one grim building, and more like a much bigger machine. An entire network of places that looked like infant shelters, but were built like systems. Photographs that were changed later. Objects removed, details painted over. And a symbol. a stamp shaped like overlapping circles. It appears on shipping logs, cathedral inventories, and nursery transfer papers in cities that were never supposed to be linked. If this is your first time on this channel, consider subscribing, because this is not a one-file mystery. This is a trail, and it keeps going. The Vienna ledger closes, but the question it opens does not. Who were these children? Why were their families erased? And what was the system they were fed into? A system built in stone, recorded in code, and then, when the time came, quietly buried. The Vienna ledger pointed to a building, so we went looking for it. Imperial Infant Depository number 7 stood on the eastern edge of the city, close to the rail yards, until 1926. That year, municipal records say it was decommissioned due to structural concerns and demolished. But the paper trail didn't vanish. Photographs survive, floor plans survive, and a maintenance logbook from 1897 survives. 53 pages of entries about repairs, supplies, and operational adjustments. And what these documents describe is not a simple shelter for abandoned children. It is something else. The main structure measured 64 meters long and 22 meters wide, 3 stories, a basement level, and an attic space sealed and stamped, restricted, maintenance personnel only. The walls were limestone block, 90 centimeters thick, not brick, not timber frame with plaster, solid stone, the kind used for banks, armories, and buildings meant to stand for centuries. The foundation ran 4 meters below ground, about twice the depth required by code. The basement floor was poured concrete reinforced with iron mesh, a method expensive and uncommon for that period. So, here's the first hard question. Why would a nursery need a foundation built like a vault? The floor plan raises even more questions. The ground level shows the registry corridor, 2 intake chambers, and a large central hall labeled primary ward. That part sounds normal, but the wings that branch off the primary ward carry labels that do not belong in a baby facility. Quiet Chamber A and Quiet Chamber B. Small rooms with walls lined in cork and felt. Doors fitted with rubber seals. Soundproofing. For infants. Then there's the air circulation hall, a narrow passage running the full length of the building, connected to vertical shafts that rise through all 3 floors and into the attic. The logbook mentions filters replaced quarterly and airflow calibration. See technical manual. What technical manual? None survives in the archive. And then there's the observation gallery, a second-floor corridor with windows that look down into the primary ward. The glass is thick, slightly tinted. The note beside it reads, "One-way visibility confirmed. Someone could watch the room, but the infants could not watch back." The maintenance logbook adds details that refuse to match the official story. Entry, March 1897. Copper mesh installed beneath Ward C flooring per specification document 14B. Grounding rods connected to basement junction. Entry, August 1897. Brass fittings in quiet chamber. A replaced. Previous set showed excessive corrosion. Source of corrosion unknown. Entry, November 1897. Ceramic insulators in attic space inspected. No cracks, tension cables adjusted. Copper mesh, grounding rods, ceramic insulators, tension cables. That is not the language of childcare. That is the language of electrical work, of industrial systems, of equipment designed to conduct, isolate, and ground energy. Inside a building full of cribs. One photograph from 1894 shows the attic before it was sealed. The image is faded, torn along one edge, but the center is clear. A large framework of metal beams arranged in a strict geometric pattern, suspended from the roof. Cables run from the framework down through openings in the floor. The shapes are regular, deliberate. This was not a messy storage loft. This was installed to a plan. Then, a second photograph, dated 1902, shows the same attic. The framework is gone, the cables are gone, the openings have been covered with wooden panels, neat as if they were never there. A handwritten note on the back reads, "Renovation complete." Documentation filed under Municipal Order 773. Except, Municipal Order 773 does not exist in the Vienna archive, so either it was misfiled or removed, or it was never truly filed at all. And this is where the question sharpens. This was not a temporary shelter built from charity funds and good intentions. This was a permanent installation, engineered with precision, maintained with routine care, and then, at some point, deliberately stripped of its strangest parts. The children who passed through these halls were weighed down to the gram. Their transfers were logged to the day. But the metal framework above their heads, the mesh beneath their feet, the sealed chambers, and the filtered air, none of it appears in the public record. It was built, it was used, and then it was cleaned out, like someone wiping fingerprints off a glass. The Vienna depository was one building, but the shipping logs we found suggest it was not alone. The Vienna maintenance logbook listed supplies, copper mesh, brass fittings, ceramic insulators, but it never says where any of it came from. So, we stopped staring at the building and started following the shipments. A rail depot manifest from 1895 lists cargo received at Vienna's Eastern Freight Terminal. Most entries are normal: grain, timber, machine parts, textiles. But 3 lines jump off the page: crates, linen, bottles, brass fittings. Destination: Imperial Infant Depository number 7. Origin: Cologne Freight Hub. Sender: unlisted. No sender name, no company, no return address. Just crates arriving from Western Germany, with the contents only half described and the recipient perfectly clear. The crate numbers are written in the margin like they matter: K4417, K4418, K4419. So we search for those numbers. They appear again about 600 kilometers away. A cathedral inventory from Cologne, dated 1893, lists items received for basement storage pending installation. Among them, 3 crates, brass and ceramic components, acoustic purpose. Reference: K4417, K4418, K4419. Held per instruction. Do not open without authorization. The same crate numbers. 2 years earlier, stored in a cathedral basement. And there's something else. In the corner of the inventory page, a stamp. No words, no title, no department name, just a symbol. 2 overlapping circles, slightly offset, like a flat figure 8. We photographed it, then we kept going. The symbol shows up again, this time in Budapest. A hospital supply ledger from 1898 lists equipment transferred to a municipal infant welfare facility on the city's north side. Blankets, bottles, powdered milk, and one entry that does not belong on a child care list. Resonance apparatus, disassembled, crated. Stamp verified, approved for reassembly on site. The stamp description matches. 2 overlapping circles. The hospital ledger never explains what a resonance apparatus is. It doesn't list parts. It doesn't say what it does. It only confirms receipt and notes that assembly was completed without incident 3 weeks later. No photograph of the apparatus survives, no technical drawing, no operator's manual, but the stamp travels. Then we found a shipping insurance claim from 1901, filed in Hamburg. It describes cargo damage in transit. The shipment originated in Birmingham, England. Destination: a rail depot in Krakow. Contents: acoustic ornaments, precision calibrated, handle with extreme care, do not strike. Acoustic ornaments, do not strike. The claim includes a sketch of the damaged item. It's crude, but the shape is clear. A heavy bell-like object, roughly 1 meter in diameter, with attachment points along the rim. This is not a church bell. The curve is wrong, the mounting is wrong, and the insurance form carries the same stamp, 2 overlapping circles. The claim was paid, the cargo was replaced, and the damaged piece was returned to point of origin for disposal. Birmingham. So, we searched Birmingham archives. Nothing. The company listed as the shipper, Harmonic Instruments Limited, does not appear in any business registry, tax record, or trade directory from that period. It existed long enough to ship crates across Europe, then it disappears. By now, the pattern starts assembling itself without anyone forcing it. Crates move from city to city. They carry brass, ceramic, cables, and objects described as acoustic or resonance equipment. They arrive at cathedrals, hospitals, and infant depositories. They carry a symbol no official register explains. And the destinations share something else. So, We mapped them: Vienna, Cologne, Budapest, Krakow, Hamburg, Birmingham. And across those cities, the infant facilities and records between 1880 and 1915 share the same fingerprints: numbered children, blank parent fields, coded destinations, and buildings with features that do not belong to simple childcare: thick walls, ventilation shafts, sealed attic spaces, reinforced basements. These buildings were not copied by accident. They were built to specification. And the crates were not random shipments. They were parts of a system. And here the mystery tightens. Because we found one more document, a photograph from the Vienna depository dated 1891, the before print. It shows the primary ward, rows of cribs, nurses in white, tall windows. And above the cribs, hanging from the ceiling on 4 heavy chains, a dark metal object, bell-shaped, roughly 1 meter across. It matches the sketch from the Hamburg insurance claim. Then we found a later print of the same photograph, dated 1903. Same room, same cribs, same windows. But the object is gone, painted out. The ceiling is smooth, unbroken, like nothing ever hung there. Someone didn't just remove a machine. Someone edited the past. Chapter 4 asks the obvious question: what were they hiding? The Vienna photograph exists in 2 versions. We have confirmed that. The first version, dated 1891, was found in a private collection in Prague. The collector bought it at an estate auction in 1973. He didn't know what he had. He thought it was just an old nursery scene, one more dusty piece of history. The second version, dated 1903, sits in the Vienna Municipal Archive. It is catalogued as Infant Depository Number 7, Primary Ward, Interior View. The entry adds one line that should make your stomach drop: print restored and reconditioned. Original negative unavailable. Original negative unavailable. We place the 2 photographs side by side. The composition is the same camera angle, same windows, same row of cribs stretching toward the back wall, same 2 nurses at the left edge of the frame, hands folded, faces slightly smeared by the long exposure of early cameras. But the ceiling is not the same. In the 1891 print, a dark shape hangs over the center of the ward. 4 chains drop from mounting points near the ceiling beams. They meet at a heavy object, rounded, metallic, roughly 1 meter across. Its surface looks textured, maybe riveted. A thin highlight catches the window light, like polished metal. In the 1903 print, the ceiling is smooth. The chains are gone. The object is gone. Where it once hung, there is only flat plaster, painted to blend in with everything around it. This is not a tear. This is not fading. This is removal. We took both prints to a photo restoration specialist in Berlin. She studied high-resolution scans, then zoomed in until the paper grain looked like sand. Her conclusion was blunt. The 1903 version shows clear hand retouching. The brushwork is careful, professional. The paint matches the tone of the old photo so well it can fool your eyes at first glance. Whoever did it knew what they were doing, but not well enough to erase everything. Under magnification, faint shadows remain where the chains used to hang. The angles match a suspended weight, and the lighting on the clean ceiling patch doesn't line up perfectly with the rest of the room. Just a small shift in tone, invisible to a casual viewer, obvious once you know where to look. Someone painted out the object, but the ghost of it stayed behind. The archive catalog also lists a note inside the photograph file. Retouching performed per administrative request. Original documentation filed separately. So, we asked to see the original documentation. The archivist searched for 3 hours. The file reference exists in the index. The physical file does not. No checkout record, no transfer log, no explanation. It was either misfiled, pulled out, or quietly removed. Then, we found a staff memo from 1904 in a separate administrative folder. It mentions visual materials revised for public presentation and sensitive technical elements excluded from general access. The memo is unsigned. It names no photograph, but the timing fits like a lock and key. 1903, the photo is retouched. 1904, a memo confirms a revision policy. Today, the supporting paperwork is missing. That is not an accident. That is procedure. Then we returned to the Hamburg insurance sketch, the damaged acoustic ornament from 1901. The shape matches, the scale matches, even the mounting setup matches, 4 attachment points, chain suspension. So, the object in the Vienna photograph was not decoration, it was equipment. The same kind of equipment shipped in coated crates across Europe, stored in cathedral basements, logged in hospital ledgers, delivered into buildings that held infants whose parents were not recorded. And when the time came to show the public the room, the equipment was erased. This is the shift. We began this investigation looking for parents. We found numbered children, coded transfers, and blank registry fields. We looked at the building. We found architecture that behaves like a machine. Soundproof chambers, copper mesh, grounding rods, a sealed attic built for cables. We followed the shipments. We found crates marked acoustic and resonance, stamped with an unexplained symbol, delivered to infant facilities across the continent. And now, we have the image proof, edited, cleaned, stripped of the one detail that might explain what these places were really doing. So the question is no longer, where are the parents? The question is, what was the purpose of these children inside a system someone built in stone, ran in silence, and then carefully erased from the visual record? The next chapter follows this pattern across 3 cities, and finds the same architecture waiting in each one. Vienna was not alone. We already knew that from the shipping logs, but knowing is one thing, seeing is another. So we went to 3 cities, Budapest, Prague, and Krakow. Each one has an infant facility and records between 1880 and 1915. Each one received crates carrying the overlapping circle stamp. Each one appears in municipal papers under similar labels: infant depository, welfare station, child processing facility. Processing. That word shows up in all 3 archives. Not care, not shelter, processing. We went to see what was still there. Budapest. The facility stood on Váci Road, near the Northern Rail terminus until 1929. A textile warehouse sits on the site today. But the original foundation was folded into the new structure because it was cheaper to build on top than to dig it out. And that means the basement survives. We got access through the current property owner. What we found matches the Vienna plans almost line for line. A central corridor running the length of the structure, side chambers with unusually thick walls, and in the ceiling, mounting brackets, 4 points, evenly spaced, sized for heavy chain links. Near old junction points, ceramic insulators are bolted into place. And here's the part that matters. Those insulators predate the building's official wiring installation by at least 15 years. The textile company's maintenance chief had no answer. "We thought it was old factory equipment," he said. "We never removed it. Too much trouble." Old factory equipment. In a building that, on paper, was never a factory. Prague. The infant station on Karlin Street was demolished in 1931. But before it came down, the municipal engineering office ran structural surveys. Those surveys survived. They describe a building 61 meters long and 20 meters wide, 3 floors, a basement level with reinforced concrete flooring, walls of dressed stone, 85 centimeters thick, and an attic space containing obsolete mechanical framework, purpose unknown, marked for disposal. The framework was never photographed. The disposal record lists it as scrap metal, 800 kilograms, sold to foundry. No sketch, no description of shape, no note about what it was built to do. But the survey includes one detail that stopped us cold. Acoustic dampening materials observed in subterranean chambers, cork lining, felt panels, rubber door seals. Unusual for structure of this type. Origin and purpose not determined. Soundproofing. The same feature in Vienna, now repeated in Prague. Installed in chambers designed for infants. Krakow. The facility on Dietla Street lasted longer than the others. It operated as a municipal orphanage until 1951, then became a record storage building for the regional administration. That means paperwork piled up instead of disappearing. We gained access to the original, architectural drawings preserved in the city planning archive. The layout is unmistakable: a central ward, side chambers, ventilation shafts rising through every floor, A basement built deeper than normal, reinforced like a bunker. An attic labeled technical installation restricted. But Krakow gave us something the other cities didn't. A handwritten note on the 1892 construction approval document. Design approved per specification received from Central Coordination Office, Vienna. All deviations require written authorization. Stamp and countersign required on all transfer documentation. Central Coordination Office, Vienna. That one line changes the whole picture. These infant facilities were not local projects acting on their own. They were nodes, designed to the same specifications, run under a central authority, fed by shipments of equipment, and connected by transfers of children. We overlaid the 3 city maps. The placement logic is the same in every location. Each facility sits within roughly 500 meters of a major rail line. Each sits near water infrastructure, rivers, pumping stations, or municipal waterworks. Each is placed slightly higher than the surrounding streets, on ground that stays dry during seasonal flooding. These sites were not chosen just for convenience. They were chosen for connection. Connection to transport, connection to water, connection to stable ground that can hold heavy stone construction. These buildings were planned as a system, built as a system, operated as a system, and the children moving through them were logged, numbered, and transferred under protocols we still have not found. The next chapter looks closer at those children and finds something strange about their names. The buildings formed a network. The shipments connected them. The architecture matched across borders. But what about the children themselves? We went back to the registries. Vienna, Budapest, Prague, Krakow. Hundreds of entries, dates of birth, weights, crib assignments, transfer stamps. We had already stared at the blank parent fields. Now we focused on something people usually skim past, the names. At first glance, the names looked normal. Maria, Johann, Anna, Franz, Catalin, Joseph. The common names of the time, plain, familiar, easy to forget. But once we read them in order, patterns started to show. In the Vienna registry, between March and June of 1892, 14 infants were recorded. 8 of them share the exact same first name, Maria, not Marie, not Maria, not Mariana, Maria. Spelled the same way, written the same way, assigned to infants born only days apart. In Budapest, we see a similar cluster in 1895. 11 children registered over a 2-month stretch. 6 of them named Ferenc. That name barely appears elsewhere in that year's entries. It shows up almost only in that tight window, like a switch flipped on, then off. In Prague, the pattern shifts. The names look ordinary, but the endings do not. Infant Carl 7, Infant Anna 3, Infant Joseph 12. Numbers attached to common names, like labels stuck onto identical items. Not a nickname, not a family tradition, more like a counting system. And in Krakow, the paperwork drops the mask entirely. The 1893 registry lists children as Series 12, Batch 3, Arrival Group. No personal names, just categories. That does not feel like something a mother chooses. That feels like something a clerk assigns, or something a system prints out. We asked a historian who studies Central European foundling homes and orphanage practices. She told us that many institutions did assign names, often based on saints' days, intake dates, or the habits of the nurses on shift. That part is real. But then she paused at our sequences. Clustering is unusual, she said. If 8 children in a row all receive the same name, something else is shaping it. Either the staff has a very strict habit, or the names are being produced by a rule, a system, a protocol. And then we found one document that gives us a small view behind the curtain. A letter dated 1896 from a nurse at the Vienna depository to her sister in Salzburg. It survived in a private family collection and was later donated to a regional museum in 1981. The nurse writes about her daily work. She describes the children, healthy, quiet, well-fed. She describes the building, clean, orderly, and strange. And she describes her instructions. We are told not to ask about the families. We are told to record only what matters, the weight, the health, the number. Then she adds one line that changes how you hear every name in the ledger. When I asked why the names repeat, the supervisor said it was not my concern. She said the names are temporary. She said the children will receive their true names later when they are placed. Placed, not adopted, not fostered, placed. The nurse continues. I do not know where they go. The transfers happen at night. The carriages have no markings. I am told this is for the children's safety. I want to believe her. The letter ends there. No answer, no comfort. We don't know what the nurse decided to believe. We don't know what happened to her. But what she wrote matches what the registries have been whispering from the start. The names were not identities. They were placeholders. Temporary tags for children moving through a system whose final destination stayed hidden. Even from the people who fed them, held them, and tried to protect them. The next chapter looks closer at that system, and at the architecture that shaped it. The nurse wrote about carriages with no markings arriving at night. She wrote about transfers she was not allowed to watch. She wrote about a system she could feel, but could not name. But the buildings could name it. They were built for it. We went back to the floor plans, Vienna, Budapest, Prague, Krakow. We laid them side by side, we measured, we compared, and we stopped reading them like nurseries. We started reading them like machines. The layouts follow a logic that has almost nothing to do with childcare. In each facility, the main entrance leads into a registry corridor, a narrow passage where infants were received, recorded, and assigned numbers. From there, the corridor opens into a central ward, the largest room in the building. Cribs in rows, high ceilings. Windows placed too high for anyone inside to look out. But the central ward is not the end. It is the hub. From that hub, corridors branch outward like spokes. Each corridor leads to smaller chambers with specific roles. Quiet rooms, air halls, observation galleries. They are not placed at random. They form a sequence. Intake, processing, holding, transfer. The children move through the building the way materials move through a factory. Received, sorted, stored, sent onward. The ventilation system makes this feel even more deliberate. Each facility contains vertical shafts running from basement to attic. These shafts are too large for fresh air for babies. Some measure close to 1 meter across. They connect to horizontal ducts that feed into every major room. In Vienna, the maintenance logbook mentions airflow calibration and filter replacement schedules. In Prague, the demolition survey notes, unusual ductwork, oversized for structure of this type. In Budapest, the surviving basement shows duct openings sealed with metal plates, bolted shut from the inside. That detail matters. If it was just ventilation, why seal it from within? What required that level of control over air movement? What was being moved through those shafts, or kept from moving? Then, there are the acoustic features. Quiet rooms appear in every plan, walls lined with cork, doors sealed with rubber gaskets. Small chambers cut off from the rest of the building, designed to block sound in both directions. When an explanation appears at all, it usually sounds simple: sick infants, isolation, hygiene. But these rooms do not read like medical spaces. No plumbing, no fittings, no equipment you would expect for treatment, only silence. And in each building, those quiet chambers connect to something else. The observation galleries above, corridors with one-way glass where someone can watch without being seen and without being heard. That is not comfort, that is monitoring. And finally, the electrical infrastructure completes the picture. Copper mesh beneath floors, grounding rods driven into the foundation, ceramic insulators in attic spaces, brass fittings that corroded faster than they should, and were replaced on a schedule, again and again, every few months. None of this belongs in a normal nursery. All of it belongs in a place designed to conduct, isolate, or control energy. Put it together, and the building stops looking like a shelter. It starts looking like an instrument, tuned, calibrated, maintained to technical specifications that no longer exist in the files. The equipment vanished, the manuals vanished, the photos were cleaned, but the architecture stayed behind, like a mold after the metal has been poured out. Which leaves one hard thought you can't shake. These children were housed inside machines, fed, weighed, numbered, and transferred through structures built for a purpose no public document will name. The next chapter follows the echo of this network farther than we expected. Distant cities, different continents, the same stamp on the crates. The network in Central Europe was not the whole story. We suspected that from the shipping logs, crates originating in Birmingham, insurance claims filed in Hamburg, and destinations written as codes instead of real place names. But we did not expect to find the same pattern repeating across oceans, so we widened the search. We pulled files from 3 more locations: St. Petersburg, Boston, and Buenos Aires. What we found suggests this system was not local, it was global. St. Petersburg. The Imperial Foundling Home operated from 1770 until 1917. Official records presented as charity, funded by the Crown, staffed by nurses and wet nurses recruited from the provinces, meant to save abandoned infants. But an architectural survey from 1894 shows features we already recognize. The main building measured 70 meters long and 25 meters wide. The walls were dressed granite, more than 1 meter thick, and the basement levels dropped the equivalent of 3 stories below ground, unusual for St. Petersburg, where the water table makes deep construction a constant fight. The foundations required special drainage, pumps, and waterproof membranes just to stay dry. So the question is simple: why build so deep in soil that pushes back? Then a supply manifest from 1901 adds a second shock. It lists materials received: copper wire, insulated, ceramic mounting brackets, and brass resonance chambers, quantity 4. The sender line reads, Coordinating Office Vienna, Vienna. The same coordinating office mentioned in the Krakow construction papers, sending equipment to Russia, Boston. The Massachusetts Infant Asylum operated from 1867 until 1918. The public story calls it progressive, clean, well-run, medically advanced for its time. But the building plans preserved in the State Archive tell a stranger story. The asylum sat on elevated ground near the Charles River, within roughly 500 meters of a rail depot. The basement contained rooms labeled conditioning chambers and isolation wards. The attic held mechanical equipment connected to vertical shafts that ran through every floor. And then there's the photograph. A print from 1899 shows the old central nursery, high ceilings, rows of identical cribs, windows set too high to give anyone a view of the street. And above the cribs, barely visible if you don't know to look, a dark shape suspended from the ceiling. Bell-shaped, about 1 meter across. This photo was never retouched. No one thought to zoom in. No one thought to ask what was hanging there. Buenos Aires. The Casa de Niños Expositos operated under municipal authority from 1880 until 1922. The records describe standard foundling care, intake, nursing, placement with families, but a customs archive preserves a museum crate list from 1903. It mentions items received from Europe: acoustic ornaments, precision calibrated, handle with care, do not strike, stamp verified. The same wording, the same warning, and the same stamp, 2 overlapping circles. A staff diary from 1907 adds something you cannot explain away with paperwork. The writer notes a sound in the lower levels. A hum that never stops, faint, steady, felt more than heard. The children sleep through it. I cannot. A hum. The same kind of detail we saw in Budapest hospital notes. The same kind of quiet vibration hinted at in cathedral basement inventories. Now, the pattern stretches across hemispheres. The buildings share the same design logic. The equipment travels along coded routes. The stamp appears on documents separated by thousands of kilometers and years of time. And everywhere, the same absence sits in the center like a missing tooth. Parents erased, children numbered, destinations hidden. The next chapter hits the contradiction that breaks everything we thought we understood. We thought we had a working model, buildings linked across continents, equipment shipped under coded manifests. Children moved through the same kind of system in Vienna, Budapest, Prague, Krakow, St. Petersburg, Boston, Buenos Aires. The pattern held. The network felt real. And then we found the documents that should have been simple, boring, official, final. Instead, they broke the story in half. Vienna, 1921. A demolition report filed with the Municipal Engineering Office. The report is about Imperial Infant Depository number 7, the building we traced from page 1. It states the structure was condemned due to irreparable structural damage and demolished under emergency order to prevent collapse. The cause listed is specific: foundation failure from underground water infiltration. The report describes cracked walls, sagging floors, and unsafe conditions that required immediate action. The demolition date is written plainly: April 1921. At first, we accepted it. Buildings fail, foundations shift. Cities tear down what they can't save. Then we found the photographs. A private collection in Bratislava holds images taken by an amateur photographer who documented Vienna's streets between 1918 and 1924. Inside that archive is a photograph dated September 1921, 5 months after the supposed demolition. The image shows the eastern rail yards, and in the background, clearly visible, stands a large stone building that matches depository number 7, 3 stories, arched windows with iron frames, the same roofline seen in earlier prints. It is intact. No collapse damage, no demolition scaffolding, no rubble. Workers stand near the entrance. 5 months after it was destroyed, the building looks like it is still there, still standing, still used. So, we searched for anything that could confirm what the photo suggests. A rail worker's diary from 1922 mentions the old infant station as a landmark for shift changes. "We meet at the corner near the stone building," he writes. "The one they say is abandoned, though I see lights there some nights." Lights, in a building that was supposed to be gone. Then the paperwork gets even stranger. A municipal tax record from 1923 lists the property as vacant land, cleared. But a surveyor's note from the same year describes the opposite. Existing structure, boarded, access restricted by police order. So which is it? Vacant land or an existing building, sealed off, guarded? The file doesn't just disagree, it argues with itself. Demolished, not demolished, cleared, still standing, abandoned, showing lights at night. And once we saw it in Vienna, we started seeing it everywhere. In Budapest, the Váci Road facility was officially destroyed by fire in 1914. But insurance documents from 1917 describe the building as intact, with minor smoke damage repaired. A fire that supposedly consumed it left it standing. In Prague, the Karlín Street station was reported flooded in 1919. Basement archives destroyed by water damage. But meteorological records show no serious rainfall that month. No flood reports across the district. No citywide damage. The disaster exists on paper and nowhere else. And that's when the story tips into a darker place. Because this doesn't look like time and decay. It doesn't look like bad luck. It looks like a pattern. Destruction reports that do not match photos. Disasters that do not match weather. Records that close doors while the buildings still seem to exist. Boarded, restricted, present, and yet officially gone. So here is the real contradiction. The paper trail is not incomplete. It is managed. Someone wrote endings that were not true. Someone erased these facilities from the official story, while the structures themselves kept lingering in the real world, standing, sealed, and active in ways we still cannot document cleanly. And if the demolitions are lies, what else inside the archive cannot be trusted? The next chapter slows down, because behind every code, every transfer stamp, and every unknown line, there is a human cost, and we need to sit with it. We have followed crates across continents. We have traced architectural blueprints through 4 countries. We have uncovered edited photographs, false demolition reports, coded shipping manifests, and a stamp that shows up on documents separated by oceans and decades. But with every new clue, there is a risk. We start staring at the machine, and we forget what the machine was built around. Children, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, born between 1880 and 1920, recorded with brutal care, weight down to the gram, milk intake down to the milliliter, transfer times down to the hour. And yet their families were erased, not by mistake, not by bad paperwork, by design. So, we have to stop and ask the quiet question, the one that matters more than any stamp or blueprint. Why keep such detailed records of the children while destroying the evidence of where they came from? An orphanage has no reason to erase parentage. A charity hospital gains nothing by wiping family names. A foundling home, by definition, takes in infants without parents, yet even foundling homes usually wrote down whatever they could find. A note pinned to a blanket. A name whispered by a dying mother. A parish birth record. Anything. These registries contain none of that. The parent columns are not unfinished. They are cleaned out, left blank or filled with unknown as a rule, not as an accident. Someone decided these children would have no past, no lineage, no claim to an identity beyond a number, a weight, and a transfer stamp. Think about what that does to a human life. A child grows up without knowing their mother's name, without knowing if they had brothers or sisters, without knowing what street they were born on, what language their parents spoke, or what tragedy, war, hunger, illness pushed them into a stone building with sealed chambers and metal objects hanging from chains. The records exist. The records prove the children were real, but the records also prove that someone cut their roots on purpose. That is not neglect. That is construction. That is engineering. You do not build soundproof rooms, lay copper mesh under floors, ship acoustic equipment across borders, and coordinate registries in city after city because you are running a simple charity. You do those things when the children serve a purpose important enough to justify wiping everything that came before. We still do not know what that purpose was, but we can already see the cost. Names replaced by numbers, families replaced by series labels, identity reduced to an entry in a ledger, clear, precise, and empty at the center. The nurse in Vienna wrote that the children would receive their true names later when they were placed. Placed where? Into families? Into institutions? Into something else entirely? The records do not say. The destinations stay coded. The last chapters of these lives were written in a language we cannot read. And maybe that is the most unsettling discovery of all. Not the stone buildings, not the strange equipment, not even the edited photographs or the false demolition reports. The silence. Thousands of children passed through this system. They grew up somewhere. They lived lives somehow. Some of them may have had children of their own, and grandchildren, and descendants alive right now. And none of them know. The past was taken from them before they could even remember it, and the papers that could have returned it were sealed, retouched, lost, burned, or buried. The next chapter searches for survivors. Not the children themselves, but the traces they left behind. The official records tell us what the system chose to preserve. But the margins, postcards, diaries, notes scribbled on lists tell us what survived in spite of the system. So we stopped chasing administrators and signatures. We started looking for the people who were close enough to see the children every day. Not officials, the nurses, the janitors, the laundry workers, the clerks. People who didn't write policies, but sometimes wrote down what they saw. What we found is fragmented, but it's enough. A postcard from 1904, sent from Budapest to a village in Transylvania. The sender was a laundry worker at the Váci Road facility. She wrote to her mother about her new job. The pay was good. The hours were long. The building felt wrong. The children are quiet, she wrote. Quieter than any babies I have known. They do not cry at night. Sister Margaret says this is because they are well cared for. But I hear the hum from the basement, and I wonder if they are simply tired of crying. The hum, again. The same detail that surfaced in Buenos Aires. The same hint that appeared in Budapest hospital notes. The same kind of line that only shows up when someone is writing honestly to someone they trust. Then we found a janitor's log from Prague, dated 1897. Most entries are dull in the way real work is dull. Floors swept, windows washed, coal delivered. And then, one day, the tone changes. Equipment inspection today. Men from Vienna. They spent 4 hours in the attic. I was told to remain on the ground floor. When they left, they carried a brass cylinder wrapped in cloth. One of them dropped a paper. I returned it before reading. The stamp on it, 2 circles I have seen before, on the crates in the basement. He didn't understand what he was seeing, but he wrote it down. Men from Vienna. The attic. A brass cylinder. The stamp, 2 overlapping circles. The same stamp we keep finding, stamped into the story like a fingerprint. Years later, his logbook surfaced in an estate sale. The system tried to keep its shape hidden, but the routine notes survived. Krakow gave us something even stranger. In a church basement, we found a handwritten list dated 1912. No title, no signature, just columns of numbers, dates, and single. The words, transferred, retained, completed. The numbers match the infant registry style of the period. The dates line up with known transfer windows from the Dietla Street facility. It reads like a second log, a backup kept outside the official offices. And at the bottom of the page, in a different hand, one line, for Father Stanisław. Burn when read. The instruction was never followed. The list survived. Father Stanisław did not. He died in 1915, and his papers were scattered into 3 different archives, like someone shook a box and let the pieces fall where they may. And then there was the clerk, an interview recorded in 1968, part of an oral history project in Vienna. The subject was 91 years old. She had worked as a filing clerk at Depository Number 7 from 1908 to 1913. Her memory drifts in places, the way old memories do, but one passage lands like a stone. They said it was for the future. They said it was mercy, that these children would be given what their families could not provide. I believed them. We all believed them. But I remember the transfers at night. I remember the silence afterward. I remember thinking, where do they all go? And no one would answer. Future, mercy, transfers at night. Silence afterward. The same words keep echoing across these scraps, promises repeated by people who may not have known the full truth themselves. And that leads to the next question. If they called it mercy, what did they mean by that? And who got to define it? The clerk believed it was mercy. The nurse believed the children would receive their true names later when they were placed. The laundry worker heard the hum and wondered why the babies never cried. Everyone inside the system believed something, but no one seemed to hold the whole picture. So we returned to the registries with a new question. Not, where are the parents, but what if parent never meant what we assumed? In Central European bureaucracy in the late 19th century, legal guardianship did not always mean blood. An institution could hold parental authority over a child. A church office could register births under its own jurisdiction. State agencies could claim custody of minors deemed abandoned, orphaned, or, crucially, wards of public interest. That legal setup creates a category of children who belong not to families, but to systems. So the blank fields in the registries may not be missing information at all. They may be the point. A different kind of truth. These children, from the moment of registration, were legally cut off from biological parentage and attached to something else. A state, an institution, a program. A legal memorandum from 1887, preserved in the Austrian State Archive, outlines procedures for children of unknown or unsuitable origin. The language is cold, almost clinical, where parentage cannot be established or where parents are deemed incapable of providing adequate care, the child shall be registered under institutional authority. The institution shall assume all rights and responsibilities of guardianship. The child's record shall reflect institutional designation rather than familial lineage. Institutional designation. Not a mother's name, not a father's name, a stamp, a number, a code. The memorandum continues. Such children may be allocated to programs of public benefit as determined by the coordinating authority. Records of allocation shall be maintained separately from general registries. Separately, not in the main book, not for public eyes. Filed somewhere else, inside folders that can later go missing. This framework can explain a lot. It helps explain the blank parent fields. It helps explain the numbered names, the coded destinations, the batch designations, but it does not explain everything. It does not explain the architecture, soundproof chambers, copper mesh under floors, ceramic insulators in attic spaces, heavy metal objects hung from chains. It does not explain the equipment, brass cylinders, resonance apparatus, acoustic ornaments shipped across borders. It does not explain the hum. Law can move guardianship from a family to an institution. Law does not require buildings designed like machines. Law does not require edited photographs and false demolition reports. So, something more was happening inside those walls. And here a hypothesis begins to form, tentative, unsettling, and impossible to lock down with the documents we have left. What if the children were not simply housed? What if they were selected? Look at what the registries emphasize: weight, health status, physical condition. Look at the timing: 16 days, 18 days, 3 weeks, then relocation, fast, routine. Like the system was waiting for a measurement to hit a mark. and the flow of the buildings supports that speed: intake, numbering, holding, transfer, corridors that function like channels, chambers designed for isolation, galleries built for observation, and then the equipment, the suspended bell-like objects, the acoustic devices, the attic frameworks. If you strip away the labels and just look at the structure, one idea keeps creeping in. Maybe the children were not only recorded, maybe they were tested. We cannot prove that. The technical papers are gone. The operators left no manuals. The coordinating authority in Vienna either destroyed its files or moved them before the empire fell apart. But the shape of the evidence suggests a program larger than charity, more organized than adoption, and more hidden than any legal rule would ever require. These children were separated from their origins, processed through specialized buildings, and sent to coded destinations we still cannot name, guided by an authority that crossed borders and worked in silence. So, now the mystery sharpens. This is no longer just a story about abandoned infants. It becomes a story about purpose. What were these children being prepared for? And who exactly was preparing them? The next chapter returns to the overlapping circle stamp and follows it to its final, most troubling appearance. The stamp had shown up for more than 4 decades, across 3 continents. Shipping manifests in Hamburg, cathedral inventories in Cologne, insurance claims in Birmingham, customs forms in Buenos Aires, registry pages in Vienna, Budapest, Prague, Krakow. 2 overlapping circles, no text, no agency name, no explanation in any archive we searched. We traced its earliest appearance to 1879, a supply order filed in Vienna, 8 years before the first infant depository opened. We traced its latest appearance to 1923, a storage tag in a basement in Geneva. That Geneva tag led us to what felt like the final room. The League of Nations established offices in Geneva in 1920. Among the assets transferred from different European states were documents and objects labeled of international historical significance. A storage inventory from 1923 lists items received from the former Austro-Hungarian administration. Most entries are routine: maps, treaty drafts, census records. But one line stands out, like a cut in the paper. Item 447, acoustic apparatus, disassembled. Origin, Imperial Coordination Office, Vienna. Classification, historical artifact, do not display. Storage location, basement level 3, vault 12. We requested access. The request was denied. The item, we were told, had been transferred to private custody in 1951. No further information available, but the inventory included a photograph. The image shows a metal object resting on a wooden pallet, bell-shaped, about 1 meter across. Its surface is crowded with rivets and fittings. Along the upper rim sit 4 mounting brackets, built for heavy chain suspension. It is the same silhouette we saw hanging over cribs in Vienna, the same outline drawn in the Hamburg insurance sketch, the same object that keeps getting erased from public images, like someone didn't want the world to learn its shape. A tag hangs from one bracket. The photo is sharp enough to read the handwriting: completed as instructed, not as designed. Completed as instructed, not as designed. Someone built this object under orders that overruled the original plan. Someone changed the design, and someone else cared enough, or feared enough, to write down that it was wrong. A second document sits beside the photograph in the file. 1 page, typed, no date, no signature, blank letterhead. The text is short, and that makes it worse. Final report, network discontinued. All primary apparatus decommissioned and transferred to secure storage. Secondary materials disposed per protocol. Personnel reassigned. Registry archives to be sealed for 50 years minimum. Recommend permanent classification. Network discontinued. That one phrase confirms what the evidence has been trying to say from the start. This was not a collection of separate charities. It was a network, planned, coordinated, operated as one system. And by 1923, someone shut it down. Then the report adds one last paragraph, quiet, technical, and deeply human in what it implies. Results inconclusive. Preliminary data suggests correlation between acoustic exposure and developmental markers, but sample contamination and inconsistent protocols prevent definitive conclusions. Further research not recommended under current political conditions. All findings to remain classified pending future review. Acoustic exposure, developmental markers, sample contamination, inconsistent protocols. That changes the meaning of every corridor, every observation gallery, every coded destination. The children were not only housed, they were studied. The equipment was not decoration, it was experimental. And when the work ended, or when it went wrong, the network was dismantled, the apparatus hidden, and the records sealed. We still do not know what the researchers hoped to find. We do not know what results they collected. We do not know how many children passed through the system, or what happened to them afterward. The 50-year seal should have expired in 1973, but the archives were not opened. The records were not released. The apparatus was already in private custody, and it vanishes from official inventories after that. Someone decided that even after half a century, this history should stay buried. The final chapter asks what remains, not on paper, but in the world. Because the buildings can be demolished, the files can be sealed, the apparatus can be hidden. But the hum, according to some accounts, never stopped. The apparatus was hidden. The records were sealed. The network was discontinued. That is what the documents say. But documents can lie. We've already watched it happen. Demolition reports describing buildings that still stood. Flood records describing disasters that never came. Photographs retouched to erase an object hanging above sleeping children. So, we asked one final question. What if the system didn't truly end? In 1987, a construction crew in Vienna dug out the foundation for a new office building near the Eastern rail yards. The site had been empty for decades, officially cleared in 1921, according to municipal files. The workers hit something they weren't expecting. 3 meters below street level, the excavation uncovered the remains of a basement structure, a concrete floor reinforced with iron mesh, ceramic mounting brackets embedded in the walls, a vertical shaft, collapsed but still recognizable, rising toward where upper floors once stood. The foreman reported it to the city archaeological office. A brief survey was done. The official conclusion was bland: remnants of an industrial facility, origin unknown, significance minimal. The site was poured over with fresh concrete the following week. But one worker kept a photograph. It shows the basement floor after some debris had been cleared, and in the center of the frame is a circular depression about 1 meter across where something heavy once sat. The shape matches the mounting pattern we saw in Geneva. In 2003, a sound engineer in Budapest was hired to look into acoustic anomalies in a historic building near Váci Road. The building, a textile warehouse built in 1930, sat on foundations taken from an earlier structure. The engineer's report describes a persistent low-frequency tone coming from the basement. The tone measured 17 hertz, below what most people can hear, but easy for sensitive equipment to detect, and easy for a human body to feel as vibration in the chest and skull. The source could not be identified, the report states. No mechanical equipment in the building operates at this frequency. The tone appears to originate from the foundation itself, possibly a resonance effect caused by underground water flow or structural harmonics, or something else. 17 hertz is also a frequency that 19th century acoustic research linked to feelings of unease, disorientation, and heightened emotional sensitivity in human subjects. The textile company declined any deeper investigation. The report was filed, then forgotten. We cannot prove the network continued. We cannot prove the apparatus still functions. We cannot prove that the hum reported in Budapest, in Buenos Aires, in the margins of forgotten diaries, was anything more than coincidence. But we can say what the evidence shows. Between 1880 and 1920, a system operated across multiple continents. It processed children through buildings built to tight specifications. It recorded their bodies in detail while erasing their origins. It transferred them to coded destinations through channels kept out of public sight. The system used equipment described as acoustic and resonance apparatus, heavy metal objects suspended above nursery wards, connected to shafts and cables, maintained by technical protocols that later vanished. And when the system was discontinued, the records were sealed. The buildings were officially demolished, though some appear to have remained standing. The apparatus was transferred into private custody and disappeared from inventories. History remembers wars and treaties. It remembers kings and revolutions. It remembers the dates printed in textbooks and the names carved into monuments. But it does not always remember the quiet systems, built in stone and paperwork, run in silence, designed to shape lives that would never know they were being shaped. The children in those registries grew up somewhere. They lived lives. They may have descendants alive today. And somewhere, maybe in foundations poured over sealed rooms, maybe in basements that were never fully emptied, the hum may still exist. A frequency too low to hear, a vibration felt in bone, a residue of a machine that was dismantled on paper but never fully erased in the ground. The ledgers are closed, but the questions they opened are still here, unanswered.